Again, I wish you all a Merry Christmas and of course a fulfilled New Year in advance, and I hope you had a splendid Christmas celebration. Warm welcome to you all to the Program Editors Forum, and of course on this program we get to discuss issues affecting the country, topical issues, headlines in the week. We do apologize for starting the show quite late, but we're not deterred. We're in the spirit of the season and we'll be joyful for being alive towards this end. I'll not be alone on today's edition of the show. I have with me Achike Chude. He's a public affairs analyst. He's been, in fact, I would not say one of the fathers, because since we're celebrating the year now, 2020, of Editors Forum. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Always a pleasure, Rita. Always a pleasure.
Okay, we also have with us a political technocrat, as he likes to call himself, Dr. Dayo Kayode. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much.
I'm not seeing the colors of red, but at least I want to know how it was experiencing Christmas within this period here with COVID-19 restrictions and all that. How was it for you, Mr. Chike?
Well, it's quiet. I think a lot of people expected a quiet Christmas. Over the years, that is what we have been seeing with the kind of economic difficulties people are facing. And of course, you know that Christmas is a period of alms giving. It's a period where you visit people and then you exchange gifts and all of that. So,
yeah.
And then you especially for the younger kids, new clothes and all of that. That's how we grew up, regards to Christmas. But as the economic space continues to constrict, it limits the ability of people to do those things they used to do, or those things that were done for them in their own time.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of that, we know, like you said, there is a reason for the season.
Yeah.
And so we are living out that season. It's a season of love and all that. So regardless of, even if you don't have that physical thing to give,
present,
you can give
yeah.
your love,
Mm-hmm.
and then give your support, to people around you, and that goes a very long way. So it's been quiet, but it's been wonderful.
Achike has spoken like a pastor all of a sudden. All right, I hope you all had a splendid Christmas celebration. As for me, I think I was at work all through the celebrations, but while at work, we still managed to do a little bit of celebration. Now, within the week, we also know that the federal government extended the deadline for telcos to block SIM cards without need to February 2021. So now we have from 30th December 2020, which was the former deadline. So for those who have, or rather, let me say it categorically. Now, the National Task Force made a resolution that 3 weeks extension should be granted for subscribers with NIN. So if you have your NIN, that's your national identification number, from 30th December 2020, that's now been postponed to 19th January 2021. So you should fix all your backlogs there, and of course register your NIN with your SIM card. Now, for those who do not have their NIN, it has been extended with 6 weeks from 30th December 2020 to 9th February 2021. Unfortunately, due to time, we will not be taking these discussions there, as last week we talked about the purpose of all this and of course all the hiccups within this process. But now, being the last week in the year 2020, we're taking a look at 2020 in retrospect. We know that lots of things occurred within the year, and one major thing that occurred within the year that really disrupted activities is the COVID-19 pandemic, of which we are facing a bit of a second wave, and that is why the federal government, of course, with the state government collaborating, has enforced restrictions, and that's why Christmas celebrations were not as wild as it used to be, with restrictions from the night service as a crossover service due to the already curfew put in place from 12 a.m. to 4 a.m. Use the social distancing, use of your face mask, and of course, if you don't have soap and water with you, make use of your alcohol hand-based sanitizers. So COVID-19 really did a lot this period, and unfortunately on Christmas Day, 712 new coronavirus cases and 4 deaths attributed to the disease were recorded across 20 states in Nigeria. Now, with the latest figure, the total infections in the country has increased to 82,747. The total fatality toll is now 1,246. Now, this was data as of Friday night, that's Christmas night, by the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. So overall now we have about 70,239 patients who have been discharged from hospitals after treatment. And still within restrictions to curb the spread of COVID-19, the federal government has announced new travel rules for passengers coming in from South Africa and the United Kingdom. Now, the National Coordinator of the Presidential Task Force, PTF, on COVID-19, Sani Aliyu, announced the rules during a press media on Thursday. He said, effective from Monday, December 28th, all passengers coming into the country from the United Kingdom and South Africa on direct flights must use the Nigerian International Travel Portal to register, fill in the health questionnaire, and must upload a negative COVID-19 PCR result with the validity of not more than 5 days, and must pay for a COVID PCR test at day 7 of arrival in the country, without which they will not be allowed to board the flights. Over time, I remember during, I wouldn't say the first wave, but earlier on the year, a lot of us were calling for restrictions on air travel, especially countries where we have lots of cases there. And now we're not having more of a restriction. They're just saying you're going to do tests and all that. But there have been some complaints that Nigeria, once again, is not being proactive enough. Would you say that is the case here, Achike?
Well, I read there some days ago, I think, I can't remember the government official, but a relevant government official that was saying that 20,000 Nigerians have failed to turn up, for their COVID tests. That was what when they were filling in the form, when they are filling the forms as they came into the country, they indicated that they are going to show up, for subsequent tests and all that, but they have obviously not turned up. That is very serious, and he was promising that they are going to fish them out and they will deal with them. How they are going is another guess, because I do not think that they have the capacity, the government, with the myriads of socio-economic challenges that they are facing. I do not think they have the capacity. So that tells you, yes, they are not proactive enough, because they must have come up with, they should have come up with something. They should have anticipated this. This is not the first time that we are having issues of people not turning up for the test and all that, and of course we know that when the COVID-19 started, the very first instance it started, it would appear that the Nigerian government was caught flat-footed, because while other countries were at the initial stage closing down their airspaces and so we allowed our airspaces to remain longer. And perhaps there was a reason, a selfish reason, if you look at it from that perspective, because people were speculating that the reason why that was happening is that a lot of the children of the elites are schooling abroad, and so the airspaces were kept open so that their children could come back, and it makes a lot of sense. Of course, it's part of the price we have to pay for ensuring that we have not developed basic infrastructure in this country, such as healthcare, such as education and all that. So as a result of that, the children of the elites, the politicians and those within the private sector school abroad. They go for health, treatment abroad and the rest. So when this kind of thing catches them unawares, perhaps, when a policy is being made, it is made to accommodate the children of the because after all, they make the law, and they ensure that the law itself is implemented. So for whatever reason, selfish reason or the other, they fail to act as a result of some of these things. And perhaps we will not even have had the kind of problem we had. But let me just say, in passing, that with the carnage or the deaths and the casualties that we are seeing in Europe and America, there is no doubt that the COVID-19 issue in Africa took a different turn. And contrary to what people have speculated, contrary to the fears that people had about the devastating effect of COVID-19 in Africa, somehow miraculously, I want to use that word, we have been spared the horrors of what is going on in other parts of the world, advanced countries of the world. And I think it was important that it happened that way for Africa, most especially because we do not have the resources, we do not have the health infrastructure. You can imagine what would have happened. We would have had death of unimaginable proportions if somehow we had not been spared the agony that Europe and America are going through.
Okay, let's take a look at this clip now. We know that, of course, the Commissioner of Police in Lagos, Akeem Odumosu, listed lots of roles, and in fact, within the week, some defaulters who were not using their face masks were also paraded at the Lagos State Police Command. Let's take a look at what he had to say, and we'll be right back.
COVID-19 is real. All club owners, clubs are banned by the state government until further notice. Even religious activities for Christmas, for New Year, activities now have secretly been 50% of the capacity must be want to be accommodated. And the capacity must not be more than 300. Even that 300 should be done in shifts. The protocol of no mask, no entry must be enforced. So in public, we shall be arresting anybody without mask now. We bring you down from the vehicle, you are entering, without mask, we arrest you. You come in, even any supermarket that we enter, without any nose mask, the owner of the supermarket, they allow, the owner of the eatery, they allow them, we shall close that place down and arrest all the staff. So anywhere you are going, you must go with nose mask. You must go, not handkerchief. Because that handkerchief you have now, you have used the handkerchief now to clean some parts of your body. So handkerchief is not a closed mask. It's not alternative to nose mask. So the government is not wicked, neither the police wicked. We are just making you to protect yourself.
Back still on to Editors Forum, exclusive to Galaxy Television. That was the Lagos State Commissioner of Police, Akeem Odumosu. And for now, we're looking at the compliance level of Nigerians to all the COVID-19 protocols and, of course, enforcement, and still looking at how far and how well the government has managed COVID-19 pandemic in Nigeria. Now, you heard what the Commissioner of Police said. If you're not with your face mask, don't use your handkerchief. It's not an alternative. You're coming down from the bus. So if you're entering a store, both the owner and the person coming out will be arrested. Do you see this as a more proactive step on the government's part in this second wave, or you would say this is a bit too harsh on Nigerians, especially within this period? What would you say, Dr. Dyer?
I will use that word, that is being too harsh on the people.
Okay.
Yes, because it's not that there is nothing like coronavirus. There is coronavirus, but like Achike said, that miraculously, it's not even miraculously, it's the work of nature. What has been there from the beginning. I've been saying it. Coronavirus is to America, Europe, and all those areas as malaria and typhoid fever is to Africa. You can see that in Africa we have typhoid fever, we always have malaria and the yellow fever. Unlike over there, you don't have it. It's not that you don't have it, but the incidences is not as noticeable as it is here in Nigeria. So to that extent, I will look at it as being too harsh on the people. You were talking about the economic aspect of why people were not being happy during this Christmas. No, it's because people are becoming highly disillusioned as regards the kind of aristocratic government we have all around us. They're just using all these things to destabilize the people. We just came back from about 6 months lockdown without no palliative, and on which over there are palliatives, series of palliatives, even whereby house rents were being deferred. People that borrowed money from the bank, they said the bank should not charge them interest, unlike here. People's loans were at the ports. When they came back from this lockdown, they were all paying them already here and there. We were all witnesses to even Nigerians, especially in the southwest, looting some warehouses, whereby some of these palliatives were being kept by some governors. I wish people could also know the bank accounts they were keeping the money that they were supposed to distribute to people. You have seen people going to that bank and then looting that account if it had been possible. So for them now to say people should sit down during Christmas, during Yuletide, do they know the meaning of Yuletide? It's not that people were not having money. The only way we drop stress and the like in this country is by going to the pubs.
Now you would see that this is concerning health, and you would say that health is wealth.
Sure.
And don't you see that as a reason of safeguarding your health, that is the reason why more stiffer penalties should be put in place to make sure that people adhere to all the protocols?
The stiffer penalty should be to the VIPs.
Why?
Because it is these VIPs that the coronavirus is catching.
No. We wouldn't say that. We wouldn't say that because they have the data report.
Listen to me. Where is the data? How many people have they tested? How many people have they tested? Tell me. Not up to 1% of the Nigerian
Well, according to
population.
reports, about 900,000 people have been tested.
Have been tested. 900 people to 200 million. What percentage is that? Less than 0.000 what? Do you understand? You have seen governors going on lockdown for 3 times. My own governor has gone twice. Lagos has gone about twice. El Rufai about twice. All of them, VIPs here and there. How many people have gone on that on your streets? How many of these conductors has coronavirus been affected? How many loggers have coronavirus been affected? On my street, how many people have been affected? This is what we are talking about. They shouldn't just use this to be destabilizing people. Each time they see people trying to manage themselves, they come up with one thing or the other.
You know, right now, we have to deal with facts because you cannot say how many people or how many conductors or bus drivers were tested because how many conductors do you know? Do you understand? So you have to work with factors. So we cannot categorically say categorically say that no bus conductor, no driver has had COVID-19.
The issue is where are the facts that they themselves are using to not be unleashing this on the people.
So would you say you're calling for more transparency on the government now for this?
Exactly. That's why I said people are becoming disillusioned about this distocratic form of government we have around us.
Okay, let me hear from Achike.
Government has not been truthful to people.
Okay, Achike, now we're looking at how Nigerian government, we talked about compliance, enforcement, and of course how Nigerian government has handled COVID-19 in the year 2020. And one major issue which we've brought up now is the issue of transparency, looking at the issue of palliatives. And I think right now we know that there are some vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines, and Nigeria is expecting, according to Okonjo-Iweala, of course, that's the former Minister of Finance, Nigeria is to access COVID-19 vaccine from January 2021. Meanwhile, the Minister of Health, Osage Hanier, said the country needs 400 billion naira for the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, what would you say to this? And of course, the transparency of government. We know that for some time, lots of people complained about the palliatives distribution here. Now, we need 400 billion naira for COVID-19 vaccine.
Well, the issue is that there is a trust deficit between the people and the government. Over the years, governments have not succeeded in earning the trust of the people. Because it's not just about playing on the sentiments of the people and asking them to believe the government. The people have to have a basis to believe government when the government is talking. And if you look at the state of the country today, 60 years of independence, the country is now the poverty capital of the world. Corruption, is working on all legs in the country, and so many other socioeconomic contradictions and anomalies in the country. And so these are the experiences Nigerians have about government and about political leadership responsible for governance. And so there's nothing the government tells them that they are going to believe. If you look at, for instance, the Kankara hostage situation, when it came up, when it happened, a lot of people viewed it with skepticism. Up to today, there are so many Nigerians that are saying that thing was not kidnapped. If it was a kidnap, government had a hand in that kidnap and the rest. Now, that could be true, that might not be true, but the reality is that, we find ourselves in a very dangerous situation when a government that needs the determination of the people, the will of the people to succeed, no longer has that trust that is needed, you understand, to build a consensus on national leadership. We do not have it. And so you're going to keep on having this kind of issues. And of course, we all know how the COVID-19 was handled. We all know about the monies that were released by corporate Nigeria, for instance, the tens of billions that was released to the federal government. We know that not much of this money was released to general hospitals, specialist hospitals and the federal medical centers across the country. So a lot of people do not know what that was done because, the issue of palliative was at another level. Government was to also release some palliatives to the people, and then maybe also some of the funds from the private sector too could also form part of the palliatives. But we have seen and we saw how very few people got access or had access to these palliatives across the country. And then when the NSAS thing started, and and as it developed, we realized that most of these palliatives had been stored in warehouses and were not given out to the people. And as at the time, and part of the reason, the very funny reason, irresponsible reason that was given, was that in case there is a second wave. Now there was nothing like a second wave, so you don't predict, you understand, a second wave, something that had not occurred. You understand? For the first wave, people were victims of what was going on. What did you do for them? You did nothing, you just kept it there. And of course, Nigerians, like I said, did not trust any statement that came from the government. Once that thing was discovered, it was a further affirmation of what Nigerians already felt about their government, that the government cannot be trusted. And that is the very, that is, very, very negative, Now, when you talk about the vaccines and the rest, immediately that amount of money was announced, people went back to their channel and said, hey, we told you, this is where you are going. We know that there's something called vaccine. We know that some of these companies, pharmaceutical giants, especially in America, Pfizer, Moderna, and so on, have already, are already through with the processes, and that these vaccines are already being distributed to other countries and to the United States and so on. Eventually, it's going to come to Nigeria. But the issue again is that we have seen instances where public policy is used essentially to satisfy or satiate personal interest. And so when Nigerians have this mindset about what they intend to do, why this money, they are budgeting a whopping 400 billion naira, it might be true. But the reality is that from what Nigerians have seen over the past few years in this country, that government and government officials cannot be trusted when it comes to accounting for public, funds, and so that's the situation we have found ourselves.
Okay, will you say that because of these trust issues, that's why we're even having compliance issues? Because I think I went around within the week and lots of people complained of not believing in COVID-19. So would you say this trust issues from the government is not making people comply with all the COVID-19 protocols?
You see, Dr. Kayode said something, and then we must also take that into consideration. The devastating effect COVID-19 has had in Europe, parts of Asia, and the United States, very devastating. And the fact, like I still use the word miraculously, because we don't know what happened. They told us there's also COVID-19 in Nigeria, and then the wife of Bill Gates, if I remember at the time, was predicting that with the state of the dearth of medical infrastructure in this country, that she sees people dying by the thousands. Somehow, fortunately, that has not happened. So, and then there have been studies, by members of the medical profession across the continent of Africa, who have also arrived at the conclusion that the effect of COVID-19 and the workings of COVID-19 in Africa is different to that of Europe. And therefore, because it is different, you cannot give it the exact treatment that it is being given, the kind of responses like the issue of lockdown that you have in America and in Britain and in other parts of Europe. So there must be a response that is peculiar to our situation in Africa and to the degree of the effects, of the effectiveness of the devastating effect of this.
I think the federal government, I would say, okay, looking at, we all complained about that in the first wave, and I think the federal government took cognizance of that in the second wave, and that's why the federal government, in fact, the Lagos state government said that Lagos cannot afford a second lockdown, and that's why there are now stiffer penalties to make use of your face mask.
Let me just put it this way. I mean, and again, we also have to realize that the people who impose these laws or these conditions on Nigerians are the ones violating it. We have seen, how at even your state recently, the governor, I think, said, was it a birthday he celebrated, Makinde, again flouting of COVID-19 laws and all that. So sometimes laws are made for the people, not for them. They can, flout these laws willy-nilly without any consequences. But when it comes to the ordinary person, then you must visit their transgression with the full wrath of the law. So these are some of the issues at play. I think that there must be a different kind of response, because like I said, remember the security implication of the first lockdown. The fact that all of a sudden crime became almost
on the increase, yeah.
you know, was on the increase radical, and people came out you know, to take advantage of that situation. So the government must be able to look at the whole gamut of solutions and then come up with the best that fits Africa. Lastly, let me just say this: everybody talks about COVID-19 and so on. We forget that in Africa, you know, about 300,000 people in Nigeria alone die from malaria. Children die from malaria every year, or people die from malaria every year. What does that tell you? That malaria perhaps is more devastating than even COVID-19. But that is not to say that COVID-19 is not you know, a serious malady. But it tells you that those who are running this country are not sitting down to allocate the proper priorities to things that truly matter.
Thank you very much. I think Achike Chude and Dr. Dayo Kayode have holistically analyzed the whole handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, I think generally we're calling for a better handling, especially now that we have a new strain of the virus in the country. So of course, we'll call on the government to also abide by all this rules. I think this is what is making most people not believe in the virus, and let there be more sensitization. Still would encourage to make use of all the COVID-19 safety protocols that have been given by health officials. Make use of your alcohol hand-based sanitizers and your face mask. I will continue to say that your health is your wealth. Now, while we are appealing to government to handle that issue better, we're still looking at 2020 in retrospect. And as I said earlier on, COVID-19 was one major issue that happened in the country and globally. And of course, this disrupted lots of activities which involved the educational sector. And now, coming to the education sector, we know that before the COVID-19 pandemic affected Nigeria, ASU, that is the Academic Staff Union of Universities, went on strike, and that made it like about 10 months that school students were on strike, and of course, rather, school students had to stay at home. But Wednesday, December 23rd, ASU once again suspended its 10-month-old strike that started in March 2020. Of course, this is due to negotiations between ASU and the federal government, and of course, the body warned that the union would return to another strike action if the government fails in meeting its part of the agreement reached with the university lecturers over the strike to be called off. Let's take a look at that clip and we'll be right back.
Expects that the FGN ASU renegotiation exercise will be concluded as specified in the timelines agreed by both parties. F. ASU hopes that the common position between government and ASU that nobody shall be victimized in any way whatsoever for his or her role in the process leading to these resolutions and agreements will be respected. ASU's understanding of its obligations. The agreements which were reached in good faith between the government and the ASU on Tuesday, 22nd December 2020, impose some obligations on both sides. On our part, we have undertaken to go back to the classrooms, laboratories, etc., to do our best for our students and our country.
That was the ASU National Chairman, Biodun Ogunyemi, and of course releasing the suspension of its 10-month-old strike that started in March 2020. Imagine school students had to be at home all through this period. Now, what we're hearing is that even despite this so-called suspension, because this is not the first time, I think last month we also heard of a suspension, but the federal government failed to meet up with its own part of negotiation, and so they said that the strike continued. I think, and a lot of people carried the news that ASU had suspended the strike. But now, despite suspension of the ASU strike, university students would not resume, and of course this is directed from the National Universities Commission that has issued a directive to all universities to suspend academic activities due to the spread of COVID-19. Dr. Dayo, we're looking at the educational sector. For 10 months, students have been on strike. would you say the federal government has not, or rather this sector has not developed a better approach towards handling this? Because we know that even during the COVID-19 pandemic, those students were not allowed to go to school. There was a form of online things that people could do that we don't necessarily need to be physically there. Would you say we did not, or rather we are not, we didn't handle this sector properly as a whole?
You see, it's not about handling the sector properly as a whole, but rather still boil down to that trust gap between the government and the people of which ASUU is part of. You see, as you were talking now, I just moved myself back to when I was going through my first degree and second degree. At that time, I don't think we have any serious ASUU issue other than maybe students versus the authorities or the government versus the people. When there was this increase in fuel price, like Babangida there, you know, and all that. Because ASUU before now had been up and doing. In the country, when ASUU sneezes, then everybody will catch cold. Until later, when ASUU was being a bit politicized, you know, when Labour, NLC too, was also being politicized, you know, and you now see government making agreement with ASUU and government reneging on those agreements, and ASUU will still be looking. You know, that was about a year ago or so. I was saying, ASUU, hey, look, why can't you change your game? I mean, I don't blame government for treating you like that. You had an agreement 2009, and by 2014 you are still referring to that agreement of 2009. What have you been able to do between that 2009 and that 2014? What have you been able to do? Government has seen you as just like maybe toothless bulldog. But like what the new ASUU president is saying now, kudos to him. If government should renege in 1 month, just 1 month, they should go on strike again, so that they know that people are now ready to face them headlong. But do you know the attendant effects of this strike on the students? For 10 months, students have been at home. Do you also know the attendant effect of government not appropriating enough funds to the education sector? Go to libraries. I'm not saying the lecturers too are not having their own. All right. But the government is supposed to give a leading. When you are not giving proper leading, then these people too now we want to cut corners. It's just like when borders were closed, the whole borders closed, and you were giving only 2 people to be operating transcontinental business. Do you think others do not want to cut corners? So government should make a leading. Let government provide an enabling environment, a level playing ground, whereby our educational sector can thrive. But when you are not giving what you are supposed to give, that's our Commonwealth, and that's why we have budget every time. What's the essence of budget? To what extent are you being able to execute that particular budget, especially in the education and health sector? So if ASUU can put government on its toes, then ASUU will also do their own part. And when the two of them are doing their own part, the students will be having half-baked graduates again. Imagine, so is it not insulting for Nigerian graduates to get to Canada and then be doing another exam? I mean, when this Ghana graduate of same DC will get to Canada and then will be accredited immediately without any. Is that not a disgrace? Is that a slap? Because they know the kind of graduates we are churning out. When these guys get back to school now, how long are they going to spend in school for them to graduate? Will the lecturers be able to teach them accordingly? No. But then, if we are now saying because of that, ASUU should be suffering, then all those students will still suffer. Because what is supposed to go to school to assist them in education? Go to universities. Only will you see those people in ICT having a hall like this with modern modern technology,
Okay.
like laptops, like everything that they need. Go to chemistry department, whether you even see chemicals to deal with. Do you understand? All those things, they are not there. Why are they not there? Go to zoo, University of Ibadan Zoo. I was there recent. I said, wow, this was not the zoo I met years back. Even when we were growing up, during Christmas like this, our parents would take us to the zoo and all that. Go to those zoos now. It's not a shadow of itself. Why has it happened? Where is the money for all those things? So there is a very big gap of mistrust between the government and the people. And why? Because they know all these monies that they are supposed to appropriate, they appropriate it to their pockets. Like actually was talking about the 400 billion that they are now looking for. Do we even need that?
Okay, now it's going to be like a blame game here now. The federal government, then during the ASU strike, blaming the ASU not being ready. ASU saying the federal government has not fulfilled its negotiations.
Let me just put it this way. If Doc is saying that the Nigerian graduate is half-baked, and we will not disagree with that. Kojo While has said it that some of the graduates that we have today are not employable. It's part of the problem of the Nigerian system. But we must remember that everybody or most people who have left this country and became great people outside, contributing their own quota to the GDP of those other their host countries, went to Nigerian universities here.
Sure.
Professor Philip Emeagwali is a product of Nigerian University, and so many other professors that are doing excellently well. So these are products of our university system. Over the years, there has been a decline. There's no doubt about that. There's been a decline because government itself, most especially government, has not been responsible and responsive to its duties. Government has not seen education as the basis for national development. It's simple. It's as simple as that. And we have much more irresponsible political leadership in this country that have failed to make that connection, except when it has to do with their own children. They will give the very best of education to their children outside the shores of this country. If you look at, there's a recommendation by even the African Union. Of course, we all know about the 25% by UNICEF for countries to devote 25% of their national budgets for the purpose of education. And African countries over time have realized that it has not been possible for most of the countries in Africa. So they came back and decided to at least allocate not less than 15% to education. Many countries in Africa are doing it. Some of them are doing it. South Africa, Ghana, Egypt, or some of them are even doing as much as 30% of their national budget to education. Nigeria has regressed under the present administration. Under, I think, the Jonathan administration, it went to us at a time as far as maybe 6%. Under Buhari's government, it is less than 6% of our national budget to education. Now that gives you an idea why the government allowed the nation's tertiary institutions, all of them, all nations' universities, all of, to shut down for 8-10 months. It just shows you that there is no connection between the government, and they do not see education as essential for national development. You know, and then so that's one. And then another thing again, even the needs assessment that was set up by the federal government at a time talked about the state of education infrastructure in this country. You know, the teacher to lecturer ratio, how bad it is, how terrible it is, and all that. So, and then the number of lecturers that have PhD teaching in universities in the country, it is exceedingly very low and laughable. So when you look at all of these things, what kind of product do you think you're going to produce? And then the issue of infrastructure. That was why, you know, the petroleum, the PTF trust fund or so was set up. And the kind of the development that was done, and that is under the initiative of ASU, of course, that was as a result of some of the negotiations they had with federal government, that we can get a quantum of money, reasonable amount of money from the PTF and use it for the purpose of doing specific infrastructural development within the university system and so on. So that brought a little bit of money to the university system. Now, you know, but the issue is that it is not enough. The government has to do much more to be able to put the universities in a position where the universities can now begin to look for ways to generate money from themselves, by themselves, through research, working with even members of the, members of the private sector.
Okay.
Because this is what happens in a university environment. But you need to create that environment. And then they're also asking for university autonomy. If you look at, for instance, the argument over the IPs and the payment system, I've also made an argument that the university system is so peculiar. It is so ordered in a particular way that if you bring a payment system that you have within the civil service structure and bring it to the university system, it is not going to work. It's not going to work because there are all kinds of allowances, based on the work that lecturers are doing. How are you going to capture that? And I know that when they brought out, they came up and the government spent hundreds of millions of naira if it didn't go into billions. The normal thing they do in the country. And when ASU came with theirs, it was free to the government, and it was much more vigorous and rigorous to the, in terms of applying it to the university system, to the extent that even the accountant general was said to have shown a lot of interest in that, payment system, and was recommending it for use by even the federal government, because it is far better, more robust than what there wasn't the World Bank or the IMF recommended to the Nigerian government. So these are some of the issues at stake. The government, you see, must recognize, and besides, there's no way why the government will not renegotiate what they did in 2000. The ASU will not renegotiate what they did in 2009. The government was not forced to make to have that agreement. That agreement was done on the basis of the needs assessment which the federal government itself set up.
Yeah.
And on the basis of that, they said we need this level of money at this particular point in time. You understand? To be able to begin to bridge the gap. We can never get our universities to that international standard, but at least we take it to an appreciable level where we'll be able to generate the kind of scholarship, studentship that the country needs for the future of this country and development of the country. So these are some of the issues. But we have instances where the government has become very notorious for entering willingly into agreements with associations and with organizations and on their own unilaterally reneging on this agreement. This is whether it is with ASU, whether it is Nigeria with the Nigerian Medical Association, whether it is with NASU and all other organizations. There is no time that government enters into, and this gives you an idea of the kind of people that are running the administration, that are running the government in this country. It is unfortunate. There is no way, if you want to build the country, if you want to build the army, if you want to build, our healthcare infrastructure, if you want to, build or have a proper road network and social infrastructure for the people of this country, if you want to have an enlightened citizenry that also has consequences in the politics of the country, because an enlightened citizenry will do specific things in specific ways, you need to focus on education. Lastly, to show you how this disparity has been growing over the years, in 1965, it was only the Chief Justice of the Federation that earned more than a university professor in this country. 1965.
There was priority education there.
The Chief Justice of Nigeria was earning £3,600, while a university, a professor was earning £3,000. Today, the local government councillor earns more than a university professor. And then, so when you even look at it, you just smile and say, this is why we are in very deep trouble in terms of education in this country.
Okay, I think we've rightly said it now, more priority now in the education sector. But now they've suspended the strike while they still await on federal government to fulfill their own negotiations. And still going back to the last question I asked now, but NUC has said that due to COVID-19, students will not be allowed to even go into the schools until when the federal government gives a further order. Does it mean that once again students will continue to remain at home? Because I don't know, I'm not in school now, but imagine 10 months being at home.
And that's why I was appalled when you were saying that government is saying they are afraid to even go into another lockdown. Is that not another lockdown? It's a lockdown already. Because when you say students cannot go to school, they should still stay at home.
Aside physical coming to the school, don't you think there should be other alternatives?
There is supposed to be we should be able to have another alternative, but the infrastructure to allow the alternative to work is not there. Do you understand? Yeah. We all interact with people outside the country, and whereby even students there are saying, "Oh, look, I even want us to be going to school as is now, because they are doing everything virtually, okay, and they are enjoying it." and they are still passing the same information. But mark you, there is electricity. Cost of data is not high. Do you understand? Then all of them, they have access to laptop, to desktop, to information and all that. But here, before, even somebody that is not having money to eat, is it that person will go and ask his papa, I want to buy a laptop, or I want to buy data on my phone? And look at even how expensive data is here. Even when you also buy it, you find out that that thing will just run out, boom, like that. Who will you also report to? So there is no available infrastructure to allow that alternative. If there is, why not? So don't let them just use this COVID-19, because we have been saying this COVID-19 is not an African issue. Let them, was it yesterday or day before yesterday? I have cooked my agbo now. I've been drinking my agbo. You see all this on my hand.
Okay, I think Dr. Zaya is giving his own personal restriction. Please let's just stick with what we have there. Let's stick with what we have there from the Nigerian Medical Association and of course the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. And Dr. Zaya is a typical African man. I think I would say that. Well, anyway, it's been a pleasure having you at Chike Chude and of course Dr. Dayo Kade for once again your unbiased analysis. We dealt with COVID-19 sector and how federal government has handled it. What's your pass mark for COVID-19 pandemic? How government has handled it? If you were giving them a pass mark, like I want to ask like a lecturer that what pass mark will you give them?
You are putting me in a very difficult situation. Look at the test centers that we have. At least even on that basis alone, we know that a lot of people, are not being tested. So perhaps, if we have about maybe 1 million people infected, for instance, maybe about looking at maybe ratio, perhaps about maybe 20% or 10% of people or 5% of people are tested. And so if you have that kind of scenario in the country, then it will be difficult to give the government pass mark. I will give them below 50 because look at the issue of palliatives and what happened to the palliatives.
All right.
I'll give them a pass mark.
All right, we'll have to draw the cake curtains there. Okay, Dr. Daya is a very wicked lecturer. Dr. Daya, don't worry, thank you. I'm seeing where you are going to. Well, anyways, we'll still be discussing other issues that affected the country. Of course, 2020 retrospect, we'll look at the health sector, we'll look at matters of security in our subsequent programs. Once again, I wish you all a fruitful festive season, and of course let the joy of the season never depart from our families. Thank you so much for always being a part of NHS Forum. Do join us same time, not next week. See you in 2021. Do have a fulfilled year. I am Rita Omodia. God bless Nigeria.